Hello, my name is Laura, and this is the 18th episode of my knitting podcast. I technically have 3 finished objects to share, but one of them you've never seen before, one you have seen before, and so it's just kind of refinished, and then the third I'm currently in the middle of frogging. So there's a lot going on with the finished objects, but then I also have 3 works in progress and then just a couple of acquisitions to share. So, getting started with my main finished object, that is what I'm wearing, and this is my Jeju Sweater by Aegyoknit. And I will just very quickly stand up to show you the color work, and I'll also insert some clips of me wearing this. But this is my main finished object, and I could not be happier with how it turned out. I also filmed an entire project vlog to go along with this one just because I was very excited about this project. So if you're interested in the nitty-gritty of that whole process, then do check out that video. But just to kind of go over the basics, I knit this using Knitting for Olive Merino and Soft Silk Mohair. And for the main color, I was kind of between the dark gray that she used in her sample or the brown bear that I ended up going with. And ultimately, I decided to go with the deep brown because, for one, I think that'll match my overall just kind of like complexion and wardrobe a little bit better. But then also, I am fighting with some gray yarn right now that I'll share in just a second. And so I needed just something different other than some gray yarn. So I decided to go with brown bear for my main color. And I will say on the soft silk mohair brown bear, it does have the lighter strand of silk running throughout it. And so you can kind of see, hopefully you can see that, but you can kind of see the lighter strand. And honestly, I really like that for this sweater because it kind of just breaks up the giant blocks of brown. And I don't know that I would necessarily go for that look with all of my mohairs, but in this sweater, I am very happy with that. And then for the contrast colors, I had a little bit of Knitting for Olive Soft Silk Mohair in the color Limestone left over from another project. I had like a full 25-gram ball of that plus a little extra, and so I used that for my mohair. And then I also bought Knitting for Olive Merino in the color Cloud. And honestly, I didn't buy that yarn thinking that it would look fantastic in this sweater. Genuinely, I bought it just so I could see what that yarn looks like in real life before I bought a whole sweaters quantity for a different project. And I'm very glad I did because I ended up not choosing that for the sweater quantity of yarn that I bought. But I'll get into that. So overall, I kind of just like bought the merino and then just to see what it looked like. But really, holding the color Cloud with the limestone, I think it worked out. Like, it kind of just neutralized to a white, and I'm very, very pleased with that. So that's the yarn, Knitting for Olive, tried and true. It is very, very soft and lovely. I do personally, even though I love Knitting for Olive, like all of their yarns, I think I am just like sensitive to mohair in general, and so whenever I get a little bit overheated, I find the mohair to be a little bit scratchy around my neck, but I do typically wear shirts under my sweaters no matter what, just because in my mind, it helps preserve my sweaters a little more, like I don't sweat on them or anything. But in the areas where my undershirt doesn't touch and I'm getting kind of overheated, I do find that to be a little bit itchy. But right now I am filming in my kind of art room and I don't have heat up here, so it's very, very cold, and the sweater is incredibly comfortable. So that's a win. But that's pretty much it on the yarn. To get into the pattern itself, I made several modifications, and it honestly started from the cast on. So a big change that I made is instead of using the upper back method that the pattern calls for, where you cast on a short number of stitches and then cast on more stitches using the backwards loop method at the end of each row, it kind of creates like a stair step effect when you do that. instead of doing that, I decided to just cast on all of my stitches and then work German short rows in that same interval that I would have been casting on stitches, if that makes sense. So to me, I think that mostly eliminated the stair-step effect that you get using the backwards loop cast on method, and I am much happier with how it turned out. It's still not great because it's such a large interval to do German short rows over, and so it did kind of create a hole in a couple spots, but ultimately I think it looks better than it would have had I done the patterns method. And I know this because it's the same method that is used in the porcelain sweater. And I remember I just did not like that whenever I was knitting the porcelain sweater. So I'm glad I changed it. And then for the biggest modification that I made, which in hindsight, probably not necessary, but going into this sweater, I knew that it was going to be very, very oversized. And so what the pattern wants you to do is cast on some stitches, work the upper portion, and then increase before you join in the round for the body so that, you know, the shoulders are just a little bit more narrow than the actual body circumference. And I really love the fit of a couple of my drop shoulder sweaters that don't have increases around the body, like it's just knit straight. And so that's kind of the effect that I was going for here. And so to accomplish that, I knit the upper back of a size 2. And I say upper back, I knit the upper, like the drop portion of a size 2. And then I didn't do any increases and just knit completely straight. And then when it was time to join in the body, I think I had to cast on like 2 stitches underneath each underarm just to get up to the correct count for the colorwork chart. But in essence, it was straight down and I didn't do any increases for the body. And while I love that look in some of my other sweaters, I think this one I honestly could have done without that and probably just followed the pattern where I increased for the body, because the drop on this sweater is so intense. Like here is where the body joins and the drop is all the way down there. It is so intense. And then I think coupled with the fact that colorwork tends to like bunch in anyway, like I feel like I did a pretty okay job on my colorwork tension and that it's not too tight, but I think that knitting in the round, like as opposed to knitting flat and knitting colorwork in the round, it did pull the body circumference in just a little bit. And so it actually looks like the body is more narrow than the upper portion of the sweater. So I think for that reason, I could have just followed the pattern as written, but I was, feeling a little experimental and I still love the look of it. I am very, very happy with how it turned out. But if I ever knit another one of these, then I'll probably just follow the pattern for that one. So, but that being said, I did mostly knit a size 1. So like the body circumference that I ended up going with is a size 1. And this is a very oversized sweater. Now, it only has like 5 sizes in the pattern, and so if you find yourself at either end of that pattern, like of the pattern sizes, I honestly think that the colorwork chart is simple enough that you can just like finagle it to go like down or up. That being said, I don't know why she doesn't, like the designer doesn't do that for the pattern. But if you really want to knit this sweater and don't find that there's a size that fits you, and if you've knit a drop shoulder sweater before and have something you can kind of reference as a good size, I really feel like this is doable to just kind of like make up your own size for it. Not the most ideal situation, but if you really want it, I think it's doable. Okay, and then just a couple of other modifications that I made on the pattern. I did decide to make the neck opening just a little bit more narrow by picking up 4 extra stitches for either upper front section. That just brought the neckline in a little bit because on me, I think it's just a better look. And then I think the last modification that I made is the pattern wants you to knit just straight sleeves, but I'm honestly not the biggest fan of that look, because what you end up getting is like a bell effect, even though you knit straight, because so much of the weight is pulling on this upper portion, it kind of makes the upper arm skinnier, and then it kind of looks like it bells out at the end. And so what I did is I knit like 4 decrease rounds. So I really only decreased like 8 stitches. No, I might have done 4.5 to get to a specific stitch count. But anyway, I did like 4 or 5 decrease rounds, and so it still kind of, I think, gives the effect of a straight sleeve, but it doesn't have that kind of bell look that I was looking to avoid. So very happy with that. Okay, last thing on my Jeju sweater is how much I spent. So I ended up using 5 balls of the merino and 5 of the mohair for the main color. And also, now that I'm looking at this, I forgot to include the cost for the contrast colors, but we'll just say the mohair was free because it was left over from another project. So adding in just like another ball of merino, I spent just shy of $140 on this sweater. So anyway, that is my Jeju sweater by Aegyoknit. All right, for my second finished object, you have seen this before, but it's actually a finished object this time, and that is my Cumulus Blouse by PetiteKnit. Now, the reason that this was not technically a finished object, but I think I showed it to you, is because I needed to reknit one of the sleeves. I originally knit one of the sleeves to pattern, and then it kind of felt like it was too big, and so I knit the second sleeve a little bit bigger and really loved the fit of that, but I still needed to go back and reknit the first sleeve. So as soon as I finished my Jeju sweater, I did that. I frogged back an entire sleeve and reknit it at the lower increase rate just to make the sleeve a little bit wider. And I am very, very happy with the fit of it now. And honestly kind of bummed out that I didn't finish it sooner because this is so lovely. This is so just scrumptious to wear, and that has everything to do with the yarn. And this yarn is Camellia Fiber Co in their Suri Lace base, and this specifically is in the color Sweet Pea. So instead of what the pattern calls for, which is 2 strands of mohair held together, I did 2 strands of the Suri Lace, and it is just divine. This is the softest thing I have ever made, and I think I need more of this yarn immediately. So that is my actually now finished Cumulus blouse, and I did wear this for our little Friendsgiving that we had a couple weeks ago, and it was just so soft and I enjoyed it. And this was a very expensive sweater. Just to recap how much I spent on this, I think it was like $200 total. So I was very precious about this on Friendsgiving and didn't want to get any, turkey or stuffing on it, especially no cranberry. But it was a little stressful, but definitely very, very lovely to wear. And I just cannot recommend this yarn enough. It's just so soft and wonderful. So that's actually a finished object now, and I am very, very happy to have this in my wardrobe finally. Okay, for this next finished object, I'm actually in the middle of frogging it because I have been struggling with this yarn. So first I'll introduce the yarn, and this is Knitting for Olive, Heavy Merino, and Soft Silk Mohair, both in the color Midnight. Also, the thing that I'm frogging, I spit spliced, and so this is just a giant ball of the Heavy Merino. So I originally bought the merino wanting to make another sweater vest. It wasn't really working out with the texture and the ribbing, and so I was like, all right, whatever, I'll reuse it for a different sweater vest. And I picked the Weekend Slipover V-Neck by PetiteKnit, and I did knit it completely, and I finished it. But this is what's left of it. And you might be able to tell just from me holding it up what the issue was. This pattern is insanely oversized, and mostly on me for not reading the pattern. But honestly, I think I could have worked with the amount of positive ease that this pattern has, but really what got me was the V-neck. Now, I know most V-neck sweater vests, or even like sweater patterns, like the V-neck ends at the same depth as the armholes, and normally that's fine. But for this one specifically, the V-neck is just too deep. Like I kept trying it on. I kept trying to style it. I liked the depth of the underarms, but I couldn't style the overall sweater with that deep of a V-neck, just for me. Like, I just couldn't fit it into my wardrobe. And so, I don't know, I waffled with it for a while because I really didn't want to frog it. But ultimately, I know that I wouldn't wear this, and so I just decided to reclaim the yarn and make something else. So anyway, that's what's left of my weekend slipover. And, you know, it's so funny that the pattern is very, very oversized, and I even knit a size up from what I normally do, because my gauge was a little off, and so it did end up about a size medium, which is what I was going for. But the size medium, it was just very, very oversized, and I should have just read that in the pattern. But I'll insert some clips of what that looked like before I frogged it. So anyway, kind of sad to see it go. Also, my husband was like, what do you mean you're gonna frog it? You should just sell the sweater. And I was like, I want the yarn. Like, I mean, I know it's a lot of work, and like, I know I spent a lot of hours on this, and I could probably just buy more yarn, but like, I don't know, it's a hobby. So I'm okay with unraveling and trying again. I feel like that's part of the fun. So that is my weekend slipover V-neck. Honestly, I don't think I'm gonna knit this pattern again now that I know how deep the V-neck is. I guess I could like modify it to have like a more shallow V-neck, but instead of doing that, I decided that this yarn was not meant for slipovers. And so that leads me into my first work in progress. I decided to cast on a step-by-step sweater by Florence Miller. Oh my gosh, hopefully this is the final home for this yarn because I will not be frogging this again. But anyway, I chose the step-by-step sweater because I feel like a top-down raglan is really good for if you might not have enough yarn. I did buy a couple extra skeins because, you know, I bought enough for a sweater vest quantity, and then now I'm making a sweater. So I did buy a couple extra skeins of each, and so I should have plenty, but I also figured that this would be good just to be able to like check as I go that I don't run out of yarn. But this is what I have of my pattern so far. And I chose this because the gauge was good for the yarn that I had, and I just wanted this to be on pretty chunky needles just to get it done very quickly. So yeah, that's it. I've changed several things about this pattern. Now, it is a free pattern, and so I don't feel too guilty about revealing some things, but the first thing I'll say is I did do like a read through of the pattern, and I can really see why this is such a beloved pattern for beginners, because I just feel like what she chose to do for this is so simple, but so genius in that it's just so approachable. For example, the option that has short rows, you know, like I feel like in most raglan patterns, the short rows will touch the first two raglan points and then go back and then maybe go to the front raglan points and then like a little bit past that. Well, instead of, you know, just doing the back ones, you know, first, she just decided to go all the way to the front so that you're increasing at all your raglan points, even during your short rows. And I feel like for a beginner, that is honestly really, really cool and easy to track. You also increase for the body and the sleeves the whole way down. So again, really cool. I could definitely see how this is such a good beginner pattern. But that being said, I did decide to make a few changes because I knew that I wouldn't love that fit on me. And so the biggest change that I made is I made the shoulder section much, much wider, because just for me, I like my raglan increase points to be a little bit closer to center rather than like, I think this pattern would have been like almost all the way on top of the shoulder for like the starting point. So I increased the amount of stitches on each shoulder by a good amount. And then I also just kind of did my own thing for the short rows. So I did not increase or do my short rows across all increase points. And so for that reason, I had, you know, shift my stitch count around a little bit, but that's what it's looking like. So ultimately I am going to go for the stitch count of the body and sleeves that she has in the pattern, but how I get there is going to be a little bit different than the pattern calls for. Like I'll probably have to do a compound raglan at some point where I'm just increasing for the body and not the sleeves, just because I increased that stitch count, but I'm okay with that. I'll just, you know, watch it closely. But yeah, honestly, super fun so far. I feel like just a good mindless raglan in the round is very, very fun. And I'm really hoping that this is the final home for this yarn because I'm ready to have this as a finished object. So yeah, that is my step-by-step sweater by Florence Miller. Okay, moving into my second work in progress, I kind of like on the same vein as my Cumulus Blouse, after I finished my Jeju sweater, I kind of like took inventory of my knits to see which ones were like done but not really wearable. And so that's why I reknit the sleeve on my Cumulus Blouse. And then for this one, I finished it all the way back in January, but it just ended up way oversized, and as soon as I finished it, I knew that eventually I would go back and make it just a little bit smaller, and so this was the week for that. So this is reintroducing my Northern Augustins number 4 by Augustins DK, or Anne-Sophie Velling, I believe. So this is the point that I'm up to. So I did completely finish this in January, and I knit it mostly to pattern as far as like the yoke depth goes. I mean, you can see I omitted the first color work chart and did just the bows, which I'm still very happy with, by the way. But as far as the yoke depth and the sleeve circumference and the body circumference, I knit all of that to pattern. And when I finished it, it was just too bulky for me, and really the yoke depth was the biggest piece of that. And so what I did is I ripped back to the color work. I kept my short rows that I added underneath the color work because the pattern doesn't have any short rows, but I essentially ripped back to the color work, and then I immediately split for sleeves because in my like first version, I think I knit like 2 or 3 extra inches before splitting for sleeves, and that was the biggest piece that I was not happy with. So I immediately split for sleeves, and then I made the body circumference like the same amount of stitches as the pattern had before because I did like the fit of the body, but I made the sleeves smaller because those were just very oversized, which is a lovely and fun and cozy look, but I wanted this one to be just a little bit more wearable, and so I did make the sleeve like opening a little bit smaller. So anyway, I am basically just in the middle of reknitting this. I am nearly done with the body. I have like, I don't know, 3 centimeters left to go before I bind off, and then 2 sleeves, but this is knit again on 6mm needles, so it is absolutely flying by, and so I should be able to get this reknit in plenty of time to wear for the almost entire month of December so that I can enjoy it for the holiday season and not like, you know, crossing the finish line on Christmas Eve. You know, I want to have it throughout the season to wear. Anyway, that is the main thing that I'm focusing on this week, just reknitting my Northern Augustins number 4. Editing Lara here. We have had an unfortunate turn of events with my Northern Augustins number 4 reknit, in that I am having to reknit it again. So here is what we have so far. I basically only have 1 sleeve completely done, and the body is mostly done. I have just the ribbing and the bind off left to go, and then I've got about half a sleeve. And what happened is that I completely knit the body and 1 sleeve, and then realized that I hated the change that I made to the sleeve. I basically made it, well, let me set all the yarn down. I basically made the sleeve about, I don't know, 2 to 3 inches like smaller than what the pattern calls for. And I thought I would really love that because that was kind of one of the things that I didn't like about my original version of this sweater. And so I significantly decreased the amount of stitches in the sleeve, but then I kind of started knitting it and I was like, ooh, it looks kind of skinny. I don't really know how I feel about that. Let me just finish the sleeve and we'll see if it gets better. And it never got better, but I completely finished the sleeve and realized that I just don't like the look of how skinny I had made it. And at that point I had already reknit the entire body and bound off. It was a whole thing. So I unraveled the entire sleeve, unraveled the entire body, redistributed my stitches, and so now I have the exact number of stitches for the body and the sleeves that the pattern calls for, and I really like the fit of it. So I just feel like the large oversized sleeve much better fits the kind of overall aesthetic of this sweater. And so that means really The only thing that I ended up changing is the yoke depth. I took out, I would say, about 2 inches of depth from the yoke. And so instead of knitting an extra 2 inches, I split immediately after the color work. And I'm loving the fit of this so far. So really, I thought it was the yoke depth and the sleeve. Ended up being just the yoke depth that I wasn't in love with. So I probably could have just cut the sweater and then, like, I don't know, did some surgery to put it back together to take out that extra length. But instead, I chose to reknit this twice. And it's fine, it's fine. I am not gonna tell you how close it is to Christmas because I am still in denial that I will be able to get this done in time to now wear on Christmas Day, but we'll see. But anyway, that is the update. I had to basically redo this again, and I'm almost done. Hopefully we'll be able to get it done. And honestly, I really am much, much happier with the fit so far, even before all of it's completely done. So that's my Northern Augustins number 4. Honestly, now that I have been knitting for a few years, I definitely see the value in going back and reknitting things to make them a little more wearable. Because I think at the beginning, when I was first learning how to knit, like, just getting entire sweaters off of my needles was such a good learning experience and was like the best way for me to learn how to make sweaters. But now that I have a few years under my belt and kind of have a better idea of the fit that I like and just, I don't know, how different sweaters are constructed, I think it's definitely worth going back and reknitting things, especially since I have graduated into nicer yarns. Like, there are a couple sweaters I made at the very beginning that were made in just, like, you know, cheaper, good beginner yarns, and those are not worth reknitting in my mind. But this was knit in Gepard Woolia and Knitting for Olive Soft Silk Mohair, which are both very, very nice yarns. And so I feel like having a finished object in those yarns that's actually in good proportions to what I might actually wear, I feel like it's worth spending the extra week to go back and reknit it. So anyway, that's it. Plus, this was my first circular yoke, so hopefully this is the only time I have to reknit a circular yoke sweater and I'll just know what to expect for the next one. But that's it, and hopefully it creates a better overall fit this go round. And now, getting into the thing that I am probably most excited about. This is an acquisition which leads me into a kind of work in progress, but I haven't really started it yet. So, first thing is I bought some yarn, and the first yarn is Cascade 220, and I believe this is in the color like Iridescent or something like that. I will include the name somewhere, but it is this kind of, I would say, muted purple. Like, it's not like in your face purple, it's very muted, but then throughout it, it's got strands of pink and blue and lighter purple, and it's got so much depth to it. It is so, so beautiful. So I bought this Cascade 220, which is 100% Peruvian Highland wool. And then to pair with it, I bought a mohair from Knitting for Olive in the color Artichoke Purple. And I feel like they're a pretty good match. There it goes. Yeah, I feel like they are a pretty good match. And so with this, I think I mentioned in either my last podcast or the one before that I have been really, really wanting to knit a cable sweater. And I spent so much time just looking through Ravelry, like looking on Instagram, trying to decide what cable knit I was gonna make. And ultimately, I found several beautiful ones. But I was like, why not try to make my own? So what I did is I went to my library and I checked out, what's it called? The New Knitting Stitch Dictionary. It's sitting over there. And so it has, a bunch of different stitch patterns, and specifically I went through the cable section and tested out a bunch of cables to pick out my favorite ones to try and make my own sweater. So here are all the cables that I tested out. And my favorites are the braids. I think they are just so, so beautiful. And then I also am loving, the book called it like a staghorn cable, but I think ultimately instead of doing this cable, I'm gonna do a similar idea, but put a purl stitch in between them, just to kind of separate it. But anyway, this is just my swatch of testing out the different cables. Oh, and also here's how the yarn looks knit up together, which I think is so, so beautiful. But this is my swatch, and yesterday I spent probably like 2 hours just trying to decide which cables I'm gonna use, because in my mind, this sweater was just going to be like all of the cables, like every single type of cable that I want. And that is still mostly the plan, but I spent about 2 hours yesterday kind of trying to plan it out. I got on Stitch Fiddle, kind of came up with some charts, and I eliminated a couple of these cables, but it's still going to include most of these if my idea, goes well. But this is something I'm like super excited about. As soon as I finish reknitting my Christmas sweater, I think this is going to become my main focus. And yeah, I'm just really excited. It's going to be a lot of trial and error. I have never seriously designed my own sweater before. So I luckily know like what the fit I'm going for is, but I still feel like it's going to be, a good bit of experimentation because I've also never knit a full, like an all-over cable garment before, so that'll be something new as well. And also, when I say design my own sweater, I don't realistically think that I can make a paid pattern out of this and include like a large range of sizes just based on the cables that I'm choosing, because then I think it's pretty unfair to not be able to include all of the cables that I really love on like smaller sizes, or like kind of thinking about how the pattern is going to repeat for larger sizes. So plus I'm new to this, like I'm not a knitwear designer by any means. And so if the sweater turns out in a way that I like, I think what I'll do is just create a pretty thorough document of everything that I did. I'll include like the cable charts, my stitch counts, and I don't know, and then probably some like ideas for how you can take those charts and then like grade them up or down for your own size. But that'll probably just be something that I pull together for free and not charge anything for, because I can see why designers struggle sizing cables, because even, I don't know, trying to cram all of these into the size that I want has been like kind of a struggle so far. So anyway, that will be probably several months away. But I'm very, very excited about it. And also the yarn is just so soft and so lovely. So that's that. I'm knitting it on 6mm needles. Honestly, I feel like this yarn combination is usually on 5.5, but I have a pretty tight knitting gauge. And also what I wanted for this sweater was for it to be a pretty fast cable knit. Like I didn't want it to feel like a slog. So that is that. And the last acquisition that I have to share is the rest of the yarn for my rosy sweater. Last time I showed the contrast colors, and the variegated yarn that you see here is Bird's Nest Stitchery. It's just their sock yarn in the color Galaxy. And I'm going to hold this with Barocco Ariel in the color Plum. And so that is what those look like. And then the sweater that I was talking about testing out the Knitting for Olive cloud color for would be for this sweater. And I'm glad that I did, because I actually don't like the color cloud with this yarn, because I think that this contrast color lends itself to gray a little bit more than it does white. And so I did end up choosing the Knitting for Olive limestone in their soft silk mohair, which I feel like that goes really well together. And then for the merino, even though I think the gray would look really beautiful, I didn't want to lean too heavily into that. And so I chose Snowflake, which they advertise as just a pure blank white, neither warm nor cool. And I feel like it definitely like leans yellow in some lighting, but I think that the limestone mohair is really going to cool it down, and that's going to be the main color that's pulled. So anyway, this is going to be my rosy sweater eventually. I have, you know, a couple things on the needles that I'm going to prioritize before casting this on, but I am very, very excited about the yarn, and yeah, just wanted to show that. And the last thing that I wanted to share is I wanted to do a quick color comparison of the Knitting for Olive Snowflake. Now, like I said, they do advertise this as a pure white, but you can see compared to the yarn label, you know, it's not like as pure white as the yarn label, which is fine. I also have like kind of a yellow overhead light, so that's not really helping. But when you look at it in natural light, it does look white. So comparing that to the Merino Cloud, here is what that looks like. And at least to me, the Cloud looks so much pinker than just the Snowflake. So that's a pretty significant difference to me. And then the last thing that I'll show is I have Knitting for Olive in the color Cream. Now, this is their silk base. This is not the merino, but I think you can still see the color comparison pretty well. So we've got the cream on the end, the snowflake in the middle, and then the cloud on the other end over here. And that's what the three of them look like together. So yeah, I don't know, pretty cool. I am slowly collecting my Knitting for Olive white colors so that I can have real world references for what they look like. So anyway, I just wanted to show you that really quick in case, you know, you're online shopping and don't have access to go see it in stores like I don't. So that's what that looks like. All right, I think that is everything that I have to share for this episode. Thank you so much for watching. Lots going on. Let me know what you're working on. I feel like with this colder weather, I am just like in peak knitting mode. So I have a feeling that y'all are feeling the same way, but let me know what you're working on. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.